In the first speech I gave on the theme of what is the employer looking for, I talked about the technical skills and perhaps also the linguistic side of things that people tend to overlook. Now I'd like to talk to you about something else, the knowledge you need. I alluded to this in the first speech, but I didn't develop it. Now I'd like in this second speech to develop that a bit further. What you need to know is everything that the people you are interpreting for need to know. That's a tall order. Now, let me make clear immediately, I don't expect you to be a Nobel Prize winner in economics if you're working for economists, but you should know the basic principles, you should have the basic notions so you understand more or less what's being talked about. You also need to have a lively spirit of curiosity. You have to like to know how things work or what's going on around you. Now, often, if you're a student, you have many other things going on around you, and those sort of things are not necessarily relevant to the job. They may be, but if you're a typical student, they're probably not all that relevant. Let me relate to you then my own experience with the hope that it might come in useful to others too. When I was training as an interpreter, I had a speech from a rather difficult French speaker who was both difficult as a speaker and difficult as a marker and assessor as well. And he started talking about Giscard à la Réunion. And I talked about Giscard who had gone to the meeting. I was stopped immediately in full flow and told in no uncertain terms that if I had the slightest literacy, that if I had ever read any French newspaper whatsoever, I would have known that Mr. Giscard d'Estaing was going to the island of La Réunion, a French territory, far from France. I have to admit, I had no idea. But I also have to admit that it was a very sobering lesson, but also a very useful lesson. I realized that I was going to have to read the papers, and not just the football pages or the crossword, but actually the bits I'd always avoided, the politics, the economics, etc., etc. And probably I was going to have to read more of those than of anything else. We tend to be very good at the things we like. I used to buy Alfa Romeo cars for a very long time. And in the end I stopped because every new car that came out had a better engine. Now the engine was fantastic anyway. What I didn't like was that the electrics didn't work, that it rusted, because I lived in the north of England. And these things were never changed. So we have the same tendency. I understand them perfectly. You have to avoid just doing the things you like. You have to actually concentrate on doing the things you like less. Sorry, that's how it is. So find out what you've been trying to avoid, find out the things you like least, and then do them. And make sure you get them all up to the required level, not just the things you like. The other thing I think to mention is that it's good to know these things not only because it might crop up, but because it allows you to understand the general context in which your delegates will be working and will expect you to know as well. There's nothing worse than having a conversation with your delegate, which does happen, and asking for some terminology, and the explanation comes in terms which presuppose that you know the rest, and it's just really this word that you don't know when you don't understand anything at all about what's going on. So please, it's much easier to interpret well when you know what you're talking about. Another simple lesson, but one which is very often lost from sight. So, is that it? No, it's not. I think you've got the message that you have to be flexible. You could be doing, I don't know, a wine meeting one day. You could be doing high finance the day after that. You could be doing technical standards the day after that. As an interpreter, and as a translator too, life can be extremely varied and rich, shall we say. Rich if you look on the positive side, extremely challenging if you look on the negative side. But that's not a bad thing either. You need to be flexible. On the other hand, you are also picking up skills that every other undergraduate or every other graduate on the market is going to have as well. The world is changing very quickly. For example, the translators, I pick on translators because they're much more technologically based than we are, their job has changed more in the last 40 years than it did in the previous 2,000. And we know nothing about the future, or very little. But you can assert one thing with complete confidence, and that is that more changes will come, and they will not take 40 years to change as much as they have in the last 40 years. The pace of change is accelerating. You are at the beginning of your careers. You're going to be caught up in all this. So you don't want to think just about what you're doing now. you also need to equip yourselves, if you like, with life skills, with things which are going to be useful to you for the rest of your career, which may not be in the same job, or it may be in the same job, but the job will have changed beyond all recognition. So in your own interest, you need to develop the things that all employers are looking for. Interpersonal skills, flexibility, as I said, learning to learn. And this comes back to the spirit of curiosity I mentioned before. Nobody wants an individualist who can't work in a team. You have to be an individualist, but you also have to be able to work in a team. Nobody will hire you if you are a highly disruptive person who may be brilliant, but who's going to ruin everybody else's work, and therefore the image of the service or company or whatever it is that you work for. So be wide in the range of your vision. Don't just concentrate on technical skills. Think also about skills that will be useful to you throughout your working lives. And I hope you will have a very happy and prosperous, and may I add, lengthy working life, because it is people like you who I hope will be paying for my pension. Thank you.